Hey y'all, I'm Elisa, the Scrappy Wife behind ScrappyWife.com, and today I have a Bible journal process video for you. I am looking at Matthew 5, verses 38 through 48. And today is Martin Luther King Day in the United States, and I'm reflecting on some of his words and how they relate to this biblical passage. Today I'm going to be journaling in a new Archer and Olive journal that I picked up during an after Christmas sale. I'm super excited about it. It is a completely blank journal, and I thought it would be great for a faith journal for this year. So I'm excited to kind of dive in and get going on this particular faith journal. So I will end up linking everything that I use down below. Otherwise, I'll put you guys on fast forward. Let's go. Okay, so the first thing I'm doing is something that is really outside my comfort zone, but it felt like a good idea to do something that was outside my comfort zone on MLK Day. And the thing I'm doing here is actually sketching out a picture of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And drawing people is not something I'm comfortable with. It's not something that I'm comfortable sharing because I'm always afraid that the picture will not look like the person I intended it to look like. And I was really, really nervous. I've sped this up a ton because it took me a long time. I sketched in pencil, I erased, I did new lines, and I think the result is pretty good. I'm pretty happy. I don't like the tilt of the head, to be honest. In the end, that was the part that I wasn't so sure about. But for my first time trying to do this on camera, I am pretty pleased. And it's one of my goals to actually draw people more often this year. And so I think this was a good start. So I am focusing on a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. that says this: "Here is the true meaning and value of compassion and nonviolence when it helps us to see the enemy's point of view, to hear his questions, to know his assessment of ourselves. For from his view, we may indeed see the basic weaknesses of our own condition, and if we are mature, we may learn and grow and profit from the wisdom of our brothers who are called the opposition." Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., 1967. In the background for this page, I am using the paint scraping technique, which is basically I'm just taking some acrylic paint. I'm putting a little bit on the edge of, this is a plastic card. You can use an old gift card, an old hotel key, something like that. And I'm just scraping it along the page to create this kind of abstract feel. And I'm going to use several different colors: a gray, a yellow, kind of a creamy white, and then a pure white. And that's going to kind of set the background for this page. We are in the midst of a sermon series at church called None Taken, and it's about how we as Christians are, one of our greatest freedoms is that we don't have to take offense from things in this world, and in that freedom is our glory. And the focus verse for the sermon series is Proverbs 19:11, but in this particular entry, I'm actually focusing on Matthew 5:38 through 48, when Jesus is talking about how the idea of retribution, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, needs to be turned on its head. And basically the idea that we don't need to have enemies. And I like the statement, "I refuse to be your enemy." You can have disagreements with others, but you don't have to have enemies, because when you have an enemy, you're setting yourself against them instead of focusing on setting yourself with God, if that makes sense. And I know in some ways it's just a matter of words and how you're putting it, but I think the attitude behind it is really clear, that God calls us to love all people. And it doesn't mean that you have to accept how all people act. It doesn't mean that you have to approve of what everyone does, but you do have to love. And a big part of loving others is taking the time to listen and truly hear the context that they are coming from. And I think that that is what this particular quote from Martin Luther King is about, because you are really taking the time to understand. And then that person is not necessarily your enemy, because you're forming this relationship. You're trying to understand. It doesn't mean you're going to come to an agreement, but you're taking that time. And too often we're so busy being offended or really formulating our argument when we're talking to someone or having a disagreement that we're not actually taking time to listen to them. So what I'm doing right now is using an old piece of vintage paper that is torn out from a book that I repurposed for a junk journal. And I thought the use of words would be really important on the background of this page just because Martin Luther King was so famous for his words and his really moving speeches. So I used those vintage books. And then this is actually washi tape that has some cursive writing on it. It is from the washi tape shop. I love it. It is great for backgrounds. And so I'm going to layer it with the kind of vintage paper so that you get two different feels. You have the handwriting, you have the printed text. The tricky thing about this particular washi tape is that it has a backing to it, so it's a little bit tricky to get the backing off sometimes, but that's okay. It works, it comes together, and I'm just using this again. We're setting the background of this particular page, layering these pieces together, and then what I'm going to do is add the focal point of the quote and then a prayer. So my thought is on using this book as a faith journal instead of primarily doing Bible journaling in a Bible is that it will give me more freedom and more room. I can bring in the verses that I'm focusing on. I don't have to worry about covering up text. I'm going to be able to do some different mixed media techniques that I don't normally do in my Bible. I'm not sure if I'm going to exclusively use this faith journal this year or if I'm going to do some in my Bible. It probably just depends on how it is going, like what I'm, getting from it or what I'm focusing on. So there's going to be a little bit of kind of a learning curve to figure out how I want to use this. Once I get all of these pieces down on the page, that's going to be it for the background. I feel pretty good about how the background is filled. I feel good about the spacing. And then I will take my attention to the drawing that I did. I'll go over it. I'm going to use a micron pen and I'm going to use the 08, a pretty thick nib on that, just so that I get a nice bold line and I can trace over the different drawings that I did, the different sketch lines, and then erase what is left over, like any pencil marks that still show. And that's probably how I'll do sketching for a while. I'm not sure that I will ever be bold enough to sketch in pen. I know that that is like a technique and things that people do on a regular basis, but for me, I'm going to need pencil for a good long time on the sketching of people. Faces have always been hard for me. I remember as a little girl that I would always draw people facing backwards so that I could just draw their hair and not have to worry about their face. So I think, it's kind of a lifelong deal is that I just have a really big struggle with faces. So I have a couple books. I am anxious to kind of jump into it, but I know it's gonna be uncomfortable. I'm gonna not feel confident for a while, and I just have to continue to learn and to practice. Once I'm done tracing over the lines in my drawing and doing the erasing, I'll take my attention over to the right side of the page, which is where I want to put the quote. So I typed the quote out on a piece of vellum, and I actually purchased printable vellum from Amazon, and I'm hoping that it will stand up to the typewriter ink as well. So I figured if it was made for an inkjet printer, then it should work through a typewriter. And I'll definitely get back to you guys on how that works out. But I liked the idea of vellum just because I liked the transparent feel. I liked the idea of layering, and I pulled out a few things from my stash. So most of my ephemera is organized by color. And so I went with some different colors. I went with a blue to kind of add a big tag background to the back. And then I added in some yellows and some browns that I could layer together. And what I'm going to do is just create a really big cluster over here on the right side where my quote will live, and that'll be a big focal point for the page. And that's also where I will add the title of this journaling section. So you can see I typed off camera. I have a We Are Memory Keepers typewriter. People ask me all the time. I really, really like the We Are Memory Keepers typewriter. I know some people, there are some negative reviews out there. It works for me. It works for what I need it to work for. I know I can always find the ink. So to me, that's a big plus. And I just purchased mine off of scrapbook.com. You can see I'm taking another another piece of that vintage paper and kind of layering it behind. I'm trying to build this up a little bit. I have a collection of florals that are black and white that I can bring in different ways, and that's what I'm going to do right here. So stapling the vellum down on this paper, and then I'm going to start layering pieces. So I consider whether I want to staple those, but I think I don't want any more staples that are going to kind of get in the way of the quote. So I'll just use adhesive putting these together and then start working the layers from there. Like I said, I keep a collection of black and white florals, either things that I have stamped or things that I have fussy cut out of papers. Anytime I see a paper that is a black and white floral, I always grab it and I always kind of break it down so I can keep it in my fussy cutting collection, because I love layering with florals. And I actually found some in my collection that had kind of a creamier feel that weren't the bright white, which I think works really well in this spread. So I'm going to layer the florals in there too. And bringing that contrast, that black and white, instead of just sticking to the yellows and browns, I think actually helps bring attention over to this particular cluster of ephemera pieces over here. I'm kind of assembling things off camera, and then you'll see me lay it back down, adding adhesive and things off camera. And now here come the florals. When you are layering things, I don't know if there are necessarily any specific rules. What I do is I just keep adding things until my eye is pleased. So I'm someone that likes a lot of pieces, that likes a very full looking spread. So to me, when I'm doing clusters and doing layering, it's all about continually adding pieces, and you'll see I actually finished with this, and then I'm going to come back and add more. So I have my Tim Holtz alpha stickers. I love these, and I'm using them to add my title, which is I refuse to be your enemy. And that is just a wonderful statement to me, in that I refuse to be your enemy just because we disagree on something. I want to have a heart that is open and ears that are open to listen and to learn. Now I'm back over here on the left side. I want to make sure to notate the Bible passage that I'm focusing on in this one, which is Matthew 5:38 through 48. I considered whether I wanted to write out the whole passage. I decided not to, since it was a longer one, but I did have my Bible out throughout this whole time so I could look and reflect on the passage. This is me trying to decide, do I want to write it out or do I want to just go for a prayer? And I ended up opting for a prayer. But first I found these little tags, these little ticket things, and I'm going to continue adding just a little bit. I needed something else over here. Like I wanted this right down here. So I'm going to layer that right in here just because I needed a little something else poking out. And then to balance it, I'll add one towards the top. And you can see I'm kind of just sliding it behind the tag that is already there, and it fits nicely. All right, I will bring out a ruler so that I can add some lines, just because I don't trust myself to write straight. So I'm adding pretty thick lines with the Micron 8 pen, and then I'll come back with a smaller with the O2, just so I can write out my prayer, which says, Father, thank you for your faithful servant, Martin Luther King Jr. Thank you for the example of compassion he set. In that spirit, Lord, please open my eyes, ears, and heart to my brothers and sisters, especially those that I disagree with. Break my heart open with compassion and help me to listen silently. All right, so the last thing I'm going to do for this page is take some little alpha stamps. These are stamps that I picked up from Michael's years ago, these little block alphas, and I'm just going to add a few more words. And the words I'm adding are pray, listen, love, understand, and embrace. And then that is going to be it for this faith journal process. Let me know what you think of this page. I'd love to hear it in the comments below. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider hitting that subscribe button as well as the bell notification button. As always, I will link all of the supplies that I used in this video down below in the description box, so you can check those out if you're interested. I want to give a huge shout out to my brand new patrons. I am so just honored that you guys took the leap with me over on Patreon, and it just means the world. If you want to find out more about what it means to become a patron, then you can check out the link in the description box below. All right, I hope that you have a fabulous day, and as always, keep it creative.